welcome back to the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. This week, I sit down with a very, very exciting guest. He played for England, he played for Man United, he played alongside the likes of Peter Shilton, and was present in the first season under Sir Alex Ferguson. My guest this week discusses all of this and more, along with having the fourth most amount of clean sheets for one of the biggest football clubs in the world. When I started this podcast, it was just going to be me and a camera and ranting about lockdown. I never thought I'd be talking to a Man United legend. How mental is that? I was very, very surprised when he agreed to talk with me. I don't really have much else to say in terms of the introduction. It is an amazing episode. If you're a football fan, you're going to really, really enjoy this one. So without further ado, let me introduce to you my guest at this time. It is Gary Bailey.
So, Gary, you grew up in South Africa. You were born in England, but you grew up in South Africa. Tell me more about what it was like growing up away from England.
It's difficult to say because, I had no idea of what England was like. I left at 6 years of age, and my dad had played for Ipswich Town. I had some knowledge that he was a good footballer. They actually won the league in 61, 62. So I just sort of grew up loving football because my dad was a footballer. At school, at prep school in Johannesburg, we played soccer. But as soon as we got to high school, they insisted everybody play rugby. And so my sort of early years at school were great. I got school colors. I enjoyed soccer. Sorry, I say soccer because I'm living in the States now, but football. It was lots of fun. As soon as I got to high school, they were like, we don't play soccer in South Africa, play rugby, which I refused to play. So I got ostracized quite a bit at high school. So high school wasn't a pleasant time, unfortunately. But South Africa is a great country. Of course, there was apartheid then, but as a kid, you're unaware of what's going on. You grow up in what seems to be a lovely country, sunshine and all sorts of beach and fun things and a great lifestyle, which actually was one of the biggest problems for me in going to Manchester. Was my background beforehand had been going to the beach sort of 3-4 times a year and lying in, we had a pool in our garden, and I came from sort of you might say an upper middle class family, and I was at university for 2 years studying engineering before I came across United on trial. I'd already represented South Africa at national level, and so I was quite a big fish in a very, very small pond, and loving life there. And the next thing you're in Manchester, they've signed you. It's raining every day. You're living in digs, 3 to a room. It's professional football. You just kick a ball around for 2 hours, then you sit around staring at a wall all day. And the whole culture clash, which today people are very sensitive to, back then they didn't give a crap. I was just told when I complained, they just said, like it or lump it, please yourself. Got 10 more like you, so if you don't want to stay, you don't want to put in the hard yards, not a problem. So you end up just digging in and grinding your way through the weather and the circumstances because you have a dream of playing in the first team. And of course, that dream drives you on, and it's one hell of a dream. And when it does come true, then it's all worth the hard work.
Wait, so were you growing up? Did you support Ipswich, or did you really want to play for United? What was so as a fan, what was your experience like?
There were 2 clubs for me. Ipswich was my first club because my dad had played for them. And when I was 13, he took me to Portman Road, and I met some of the players, and I got all the shirt and the little pendant and everything else. So I loved Ipswich Town. And my second club was always United. And that was because of George Best. It's just, growing up in South Africa, we didn't have television until late 70s. So my early 70s, when I was listening, I only had the radio. And you would hear these commentaries, and Best is on the ball, and Best has beaten 4 players, and Best has stuck it in the top corner. And it was like, wow. And Bobby Charlton, of course, who was another legend. And you heard these names. And so for me, it was Ipswich were my team, but Man United was my love. It was like, wow, this is the greatest club in the world. And so when I came actually on trial, I went to Ipswich in my first year that I came on trial, and it snowed for 9 weeks. So I never got to kick a ball for them. Yeah.
But nice Bobby experience Robson, from South Africa.
Yeah, no, exactly. But Bobby Robson was very, very good to me. And a year later, when I came back, I actually didn't want to come to England on trial. I went to Holland, I went to Germany, and eventually someone said, you know what, United are looking for a young keeper. And my dad knew Dave Sexton and said, look, will you, just have a look at Gary and see what you think. And they had a look at me in the reserves against Everton at Goodison Park, and they signed me up. And funny enough, my debut was against Ipswich, and Bobby Robson came across and said, damn, if it hadn't have snowed so much, I maybe could have got you. But he was great. He was my England manager at the World Cup in '86. I was very lucky to have had, Dave Sexton was my England under-21 manager. He was my first manager. Ron Atkinson was just a brilliant manager, and we were so unlucky not to win the league with him. So Alex, of course, say no more, the greatest of all time. And Bobby Robson, at England level. So, 4 fantastic managers.
You had some of the world's best right there, and you eventually, like you said, you got to play under Sir Bobby Robson at England, even though he couldn't get you on at Ipswich. So what was it that because you paid? So as far as I'm aware, you paid for your own fare all the way to Manchester, right? And that would have been a lot of money. What were you convinced that I'm going to do it, or was it just let me just try it because you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so I might as well just go for it?
It's a mixture of all of those. There actually was an agent involved, and he took 4 of us South African players, or South African bred players, to Holland. And in the end, we paid him back for the airfare because he was just trying to get a deal going. In the end, my dad did the deal with Manchester United. But I just represented South Africa. I was 18 years of age. I think I just turned 19. And I thought, hell, if I'm good enough to play for South Africa, then I must have a chance. So, but I didn't want to go to England because I knew it was tough. And Holland was, I could speak Dutch, what they call Afrikaans back in South Africa. So I felt I could probably fit in there. And that would have been a much gentler entry. To this day, I still think I was too young to have played for United at 20. The pressure is just unbelievable. It would have been a nicer entry to have played for the team that I was on trial with, which is called AZ Alkmaar. And maybe then gone from Alkmaar to Ajax and then Ajax to Man United. That would have been the sensible progression. That's what they probably do today. Back in the day, if you could make it, they threw you in, and it was all part of the club's nature that you would give the youngsters a bit more time to settle in because that's what you did back then. So I felt I was good enough to at least have a shot at it. The problem was when I joined United, I was 5th of 5 keepers. It wasn't like there was, an open invitation. There was Alex Stepney, there was Paddy Roach, myself, and then there was 2 other keepers that they were keeping an eye on. So I got to 3rd choice fairly quickly, and then Alex broke his arm, and Paddy went to the first team, and I went in the reserves, and I actually did my knee. I tore a slight tear in my meniscus, and they said, look, you're going to have to operate. And I was only on a short stay of 1 year. And I thought, you know what, by the time they operate and I come right, I'll be on the way home. And then they came to me and said, look, with Alex's injury, you need to play in the reserves. How's your knee? And I went, sod it, I'll play. I'll find a way around. The knee wasn't that bad. It was a little tear, but and so I played in the reserves and played really well. I did some good stuff, and they were saying to me, you know what, if you can stay a few more years, you've got a chance of making it. Because I was really good at catching crosses and reading the play, and I was a very confident lad coming from South Africa. So I had all those ingredients. And my dad was a keeper, so my basics were absolutely spot on. And then Paddy played in a game at Birmingham when they lost 5-1. And so the manager said, look, I can't play him again. He's just not up to it. I'm looking around thinking, well, it only leaves me, so I'm playing. And and then next thing I know, they're busy signing Jim Blight from Coventry, and he arrived on the Thursday for a fitness test, and I'm thinking, I'm just wasting my time here. This is too big a club. I'm never going to get a shout. And the medical fell through. He had something wrong with his back. And on the Friday morning, I came in to training at the ground at Old Trafford, and Dave Sexton pulled me aside. He said, look, the deal with Jim Blight has fallen through. I've already said I'm not going to play Paddy Roach. He said, you're in tomorrow. And man, it was crazy. It was, and of course it was against Ipswich, my dad's club and where I was born. So I was like, wow, okay, this is surreal, And I played in front of 5,000 in the reserves at Old Trafford. So it wasn't like the ground was unknown to me, but you walk out in front of 80,000, it's a different story. And man, they were singing my name from the very beginning. And I was like, holy crap, I said, if I never do anything again, at least I can say I played for United at Old Trafford. And I did well. I was confident. I came out. I did what I had to do. We won 2-0. I was on BBC there. I was asked by Louis Edwards, Martin Edwards' dad, who was still chairman at the time, to go and speak to BBC. And remember, back in those days, there wasn't a ton of media. If you were asked on BBC, you could be pretty certain the entire country would get to hear you. And the manager said, go up, put your tie on, look smart, be modest, and thank the rest of your teammates. I said, fine, I'll do that. So I quickly have a shower, I rush in, I get my tie, I'm about to put it on. I find that the lads have cut my tie in half. So I've got so much tie. So
a little half tie, yeah.
Yeah, so I got my jacket's tied up to here with a little bit of tie. They cut the end of my socks off, so so I had half a sock on each foot, and then I went up and talked to the cameras and all that. So it was a good gig. It was all in the right spirit. And 3 days later, we played Everton, and they had a big centre forward called Bob Latchford. And from the get-go, he came for me. He elbowed me, stood on my toe, he hit me in the you-know-wheres. He just came after me. And of course, I spent so much time trying to get in front of him that I missed the cross, and we went 1-0 down, and then I flapped it 2 more. And so after the match, Dave Sexton said, look, son, that was not the best. He said, I'll give you one more try. Chelsea away, Stamford Bridge, Saturday. If you don't do well, I'm sorry, I've got to let you go. So we played Chelsea. We won
just 2 games, just 3 games, and you.
Oh yeah, no. Well, let go as in out of the first team and into the reserve. But then the chances of you ever making it pretty small. So fair enough. So we won 1-0, kept a clean sheet. This time I was aware of, they came for me, a couple of the big guys, and I just brushed them off and dealt with it and didn't get myself caught up in anything. And Dave came to me afterwards, Dave Sexton, he said, well done, son. That's much better. That was a mature performance. You managed everything spot on. And that was how I went for the rest of the season. We had some incredible games. We lost 5-3 against West Brom, which is still one of the games that people watch. And I pulled out 1 or 2 magical saves, but then 5 went past me. So I'm like, crap. But those saves, fortunately, because they were so good, and to this day, they're still 2 of the best saves I've ever made, both from Cyril Regis, the late Cyril Regis. The crowd loved it, and the manager thought, well, we'll keep him in a bit longer. And before we knew it, we were playing quarterfinals in the FA Cup, which back in the day, the FA Cup was like European Champions League is today. It was massive. And then we're in semi-finals against Liverpool, and we drew the first one 2-2, and I thought, that's it, we've blown it. Went to Goodison Park. Jimmy Green off 8 minutes from time, and next thing, we're cutting records, and we're off to Wembley, and it's like, what the hell is happening, And we were 2-0 up. We were 2-0 down. Not much I could do about them. And then we scored 2 in the last 5 minutes, and everybody was still celebrating when I think it was Ricks crossed the ball, took a slight deflection of Martin Buchan's boot and misread the cross. Fast stick, Sunderland beats Alveston, and that was it, 3-2, game over. And you're looking at it going, what could I have done, or should I have done more? Or it wasn't like it was a bad mistake, but it's what everybody focuses on. It's the hard part of being a goalkeeper. You don't have to make a bad mistake. You've just got to be the person who's most to blame. And so that brought me down to earth with a massive bump. Yeah. But probably was a good thing, because the next season I was just top class. The next season we finished second to Liverpool. In fact, we went into the final game against Leeds at Ellen Road with a chance to win the league. And I put in a performance that year that was way more mature than my years, and came runner-up to Glenn Hoddle in Young Player of the Year. And it was a fantastic season. And I mentioned that not to gloat. The problem was I couldn't keep it up the following season. I went off on an England tour, which I should never have done. Got 3 weeks, because you don't get a break. And you're with England players and Kevin Keegan and Trevor Brooking, and so you're on your best behavior and you're training hard. You're training with Shilton and Clements. And you get 3 weeks off. I love my sunshine, so I get 3 weeks off, go back to South Africa. It's middle of winter. Before I know it, I'm back in Manchester in August, and it's all starting off again, and I haven't rested. I haven't recharged the batteries, and it was about 4 months into that season that I lost interest in a way, which sounds silly, but you've got to be up for every game. And I had one bad game. It wasn't even a bad game, really. It was just one where I maybe could have done better, and players turned on me a little bit, and then I tried too hard the next match, and then I did make a mistake, and then the players really turned on me. And then I was like, why are you turning? Where's all the He's our great young goalkeeper we'll go on to. And then I saw the nasty side of it, or the tough side, not nasty, the tough side back in the day.
You said you wanted to get some out of the oven. Do you want to do that now? Because it's been
Yeah,
about 15 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, good idea. 1 sec.
Right. So I want to take you back a little. That first time you stepped onto the Old Trafford pitch, what's that feeling like? Because you're speaking to someone, I feel like it's very hard for players to understand, or ex-players to understand what it's like, because they've already like lived up to it. But how would you describe that feeling? You know, those first 2-3 steps, you said it yourself, the fans were chanting your name, which you couldn't believe, getting that BBC interview, you know, you were there, you were living the dream at that point, at Old Trafford, at one of the biggest clubs in the world. What's that feeling like? How do you sum it up?
You see, you can't get over excited by it, because although it means the world to you underneath, you know, you're next to pros who've been doing this a couple of 100 times minimum. You know, Martin Buck and Gordon McQueen, Joe Jordan. If you start bouncing around like a kid, then look at you and go, what the hell? So you got to mature up. And as I said, I played reserves. I played in South Africa 2 years in the first division in South Africa, which was probably third division in England. So I had enough experience. I had well over 100 games at senior level in, say, third division. So it wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't want to come across as someone who couldn't cope with the pressure. So you have to almost shut it out. And when you first walk out, you're like, wow, this is the dream. But as soon as you get in goals, you're like, hey, knock the ball, knock it, get it off the grass. I want to see the skip of the ball off the wet grass, and give me a couple of crosses. And so you're focused on the game. And from the moment kickoff goes, there's nothing else. No matter what they're singing, you're just saying, if that ball gets over, that is centre forward Paul Mariner. He was England's striker. You think, if Maris gets it, I've got to do this. If he gets it, I've got to do this. Where's Gordon McQueen? Where's Bucken? And that's how you're thinking. And before you know it, game's over. You've won it 2-0, and then you're off to speak to BBC, and then you get home, and then you go, wow, what the hell just happened? And funny enough, I had some mates who I was staying in Prestwich in the north of Manchester at the time, in Diggs. And some of the guys from down the road were big Reds fans. And that night, they were like super excited, because you go from being, hey, I know someone who plays in the reserves at United, to I know Gary Bailey, because suddenly your name, everyone knows it. And so we went into a pub in downtown Manchester, and the Reds fans were like, oh, awesome. And the Blue fans were, yeah, you're a waste of time. You don't know what you're doing. And then a fight broke out, and I got the hell out of there. And on Monday, Dave Sexton calls me, and I said, yeah. He goes, why'd you trash the pub? I said, I never trashed the pub. I said, some fans were at each other. I said, I got the hell out of there. He said, well, we now have to pay for the damage because you walked in. He said, from now on, you do not fraternize with the fans. You're on a new level now. He said, get rid of that van you got outside and go and buy a car. Here's an open check. Go to the tailors down the road, a guy called Phil Black, who had a fancy Armani store. And he said, stock yourself up. And he said, I never want to see you in a trashy t-shirt, holy pair of jeans, or driving a crappy car again. You're now a Man United first team player. So overnight, my life just literally turned right around. And to think that I was then playing FA Cup semis and a final within the next 5 months, it was just a hell of a lot coming very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't just playing FA Cup finals. You won not just one FA Cup, you won 2 FA Cups. And obviously, this was at a time when the FA Cup was massive. It was the most, the biggest trophy. I mean, even now, it's the oldest trophy in the world. And I feel like it doesn't get the respect that it deserves. But what was that feeling like? And in terms of going into your first ever final, again, I know you were saying you've got to be calm, you've got to be composed because you're with, vets of the game. What are you sort of telling yourself on the day before the day of the game, the night before you go to sleep? Surely you're staying awake all night thinking, oh my God, what if I make a mistake? What's going through your head?
No, you treat it like almost any other game. I mean, I think we played Fulham away at Craven Cottage in the 3rd round. That was really tough on a wet, cold day and slippery ball. You get through, then you play somebody else, and I think it was West Ham, and then you're in the semi-finals against Liverpool, reigning European champion. So at each of these games is tough. And the FA Cup final is just taking it up another notch, not so much for the 90 minutes you play, it's all the stuff around it, the interviews, staying in a fancy hotel out in Croydon somewhere just outside London. On the day you're driving up to Wembley and there's just people everywhere and TV vans. And So it's a little bit more than normal, but it's still 90 minutes of football. So the same thing, you go out, you shake hands with Prince Charles, you get in your goals. Now knock the ball at me, let me get a touch of this. And from the kickoff, you're now organizing your defense and you're concentrating. It's only afterwards when you lose 3-2 and people look at you and go, well, the deciding goal is sort of on you. And you're like, yeah, is it really? But at the end of the day, as a keeper, you take the knock.
As a goalkeeper, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the name of the game. And you say, but hell, I was good in the semis and I made a save in the quarter. It doesn't matter. People watch the final, they remember the final. So, I went back to South Africa for a break afterwards, and everywhere I went, people were like, oh, that last minute. And you're like, okay, don't keep on about it. But I came back then revved up for a proper season. It was about 3 years later, we got to the FA Cup again. That was against Brighton. And that's when I made a save in the dying minutes that, again, wasn't a great save, and in the same way that the mistake in 79 wasn't a big mistake. But people remember it because it's a crucial moment. Last second at 2-2 against Brighton. And I doubt Brighton will ever have a chance to win a trophy like that ever again, probably, unless they get a lot of money from some benefactor. So that was their one big chance.
And you stopped.
You make a save. Yeah, you make a save, you stop it.
I've got a friend who's a Brighton fan. I'm going to tell him that.
Yeah, well, even the Brighton fans say that was their one chance at glory, and it's gone. Yeah. Went back 4 days later on the Thursday and absolutely pummeled them 4-0, and came back to Manchester and partied, and that was getting silverware at last. After that was 4 years I've been in the team by then, and as I said, the first year and a half was brilliant. The next 2 years were, they weren't my best, and I was up and down and trying so hard, but not enjoying the football that much and never getting a break. It's today you would rotate. If it was David De Gea, you'd say, look, son, you played a lot of matches, go back to Spain for a weekend. And in those days you didn't have, and you didn't, I was allowed to telephone my folks once a week once a month for 10 minutes, once a month for 10 minutes, and you leave everything. I left university behind. I studied part-time and finished my physics degree at Manchester University. But it was a different culture. Loved my sunshine. Wanted to be at university. Didn't enjoy the football environment and the darts and snooker and drinking and all that. So it made it a very tough job. If you don't enjoy the surroundings of the job, you don't enjoy where you live so much, then and you don't have much time off, because every year it was with England touring, it becomes a drag, and you've got to really dig deep. And it's tough for United fans to hear that, because you think, oh, playing for United can never be a drag. But today they rest you so that it's never a drag. It's always exciting. And if you drop a little bit in energy, they'll give you a break. But in those days, I played 60 games a year, year after year after year. I played with broken fingers. I played with calf muscles that were strained and thigh muscles that had tears in them. And so you just kept playing. So it really, and it was very physical. I mean, the old folk watching football today will say, well, back in my day, you could tackle, but you really could back, and you got smashed in games. So, as a keeper, you get
rugby. You ended up pretty much playing rugby now, innit?
Yeah, not far off. Most of the keepers were 6'4" with noses that were broken and over here. And that wasn't my style. So, I got pummeled game after game. So it got to the point where when we won the FA Cup in '83, I thought, okay, you need just to mature. You need to stop worrying about whether you're enjoying life. You're playing for United. You need to be winning trophies. And we went on a spell where we won the Charity Shield against Liverpool. After that, we got to another final. We got to European semi-finals. We finished, I think, 4 seasons running. We were in the top 2 going into the final 2 or 3 weeks. We were very, very close to being a top-class side. Very, very close. But if we'd have had Robbo fit for 1 season, we might have done it. But he was fit for half this season and a third of that season and half the next season. And we just needed to have everyone on board for 1 season. I think we were more than good enough to have wrapped up the title.
I want to ask you about England then, because I feel like you were very unfortunate, because you were competing against potentially the best, or at least the second best ever England goalkeeper in terms of Peter Shilton. What was it like, obviously, being called up and then being given a cap, but also being, Peter Shilton was known as one of the world's best, being under him and sort of seeing how he worked. Did you take anything from his his training regime and how he operated?
Yeah, I think you pick up from anyone that you're on international duty with. Chris Woods was my number 2 for the under-21s for years, and we would work together. Shilton was just phenomenal. His work rate was, I worked hard. And when I trained with him, he could outwork me. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen that before. Clemens was the opposite. Clem would come in, have a few shots and walk off for a shower. There were two. If you had to pick the 3 greatest goalkeepers of England of all time, it would be probably Shilton, Banks, Clemens in that order. Or some would say Banks, Shilton, Clemens. So I had 2 of the best 3 ever. And so I never got a shout. If I had a Scottish mother, for example, I could have racked up 150 caps for Scotland. And that would have made a difference, because in the locker room, it took me till 1985 to get a cap for England. I played under 21s in 79. So 6 years. And, in the locker room, people look around and they go, oh, Stevie Coppell just scored for England, and Martin Buchan and Gordon McQueen, they were for Scotland, and Arnie Murens off for Holland. And, and then they look at me and they go, where are you? Under 21s? And you have an image and you have a gravitas. And without being able to play at international level regularly, you don't have gravitas. You don't appear in World Cups. And if I did, like 86, I never got to play because Shilton played. So, yeah, you get lucky. You have your debut for United because Alex Stepney gets injured and Paddy Roach doesn't play well. And then the flip side is you sit on the bench for 6 years for England. And when eventually you do get in the squad, you mess up your knee and have to retire. So that side of it really was difficult, because
was there not as many England games back then? Because now we get friendlies against San Marino every other day. And it's like everyone gets an England cap now. So like they're going to start dishing them out Championship players. But I'm guessing back then it was like, you'd only ever play your best team, and there wasn't as many England games. It was mainly for your club. Is that what the case was?
Yeah, very much so. There was the occasional end of season tour to Australia or something where they'd blood a whole bunch of new players. But I never made those tours. Excuse me. The tours I made were in the alternate years where they were playing for European Championship or World Cup qualifiers. So those are massive games. The one time in Australia, 84, I was on a United tour, so I couldn't go. So, you didn't get as many games as you do now. And so you basically had to wait. And it's not like waiting for one keeper. I had to wait for 2. So when Clemens eventually retired, then I was on the bench more often, but still no games. And as I said, in terms of the other players around me, I knew that they always looked at me and thought, nah, he's an under-21 goalkeeper. Even though I was 24, I was still playing under-21s as an overage player. And had I been able to play for Scotland or Holland or any country, really, I could have racked up a lot of international performances and then World Cup performances. And that's where you make your name. And to this day, a lot of players I know of who weren't that good are still remembered because they were good during the World Cup.
Okay, yeah, I see. So let's sort of move forward a little into the 86 season, I believe it was, where it wasn't the best start. I think the previous season, Ron Atkinson, who was the manager, you'd failed in your title charge, and then going into the new season, it wasn't the best start, and Ron Atkinson was sacked. What was that feeling like? As players, especially even nowadays, it's the manager who normally gets who's at the chopping block. He's the one who loses his job, and the players almost get away with it. As a player at the time, what were you thinking? Were you thinking, oh my God, we just got this guy sacked? Or were you thinking, you know what, he was rubbish, he probably deserved it?
No, he was very good, Ron. He was fantastic. As I say, we should have won the league with him, and that's on us players, not on him. You know what? It was a tough one because we came back from the World Cup and we lost the spine of our team. So my knee was in tatters and I was out for 6 months from the time I got back. So Chris Turner came in. But when you think I was out, Robbo was out with his shoulder, which he damaged in the World Cup. Norman Whiteside came back. His knee was in trouble. And there was one other important player. But even if you just take those 3, that's goalkeeper, midfield, and center forward. And we were in the treatment room for, like I said, the first 4 months of the season. And I think in losing your spine of your team, you lose crucial players. And I was an organizer, so Robert was a driving force, and Norman was just the hard player. And the club, the team really struggled. I mean, I was surprised. I thought there was enough talent there not to missed us because everyone who replaced us were on. Chris Turner was a good keeper. There was still Mark Hughes and Frank Stapleton, but somehow maybe we were the players who could bring it all together somehow. And they really struggled. And by the time they got sacked, Ron, they were just above the relegation zone, playing terrible football. Like I said, there must have been one or two others injured. Maybe Arnie Muren came back injured as well. I can't remember. And then when he got sacked, he arranged for a farewell at his house. And he got caterers in and everything. And I turned up. Robbo was there. Norman Whiteside was there. And that was it. Nobody else turned up.
No one else?
Nobody else turned up.
Why do you think that was?
I said at the time to the players when I went in the locker room, the dressing room afterwards, I said, you're a disgrace, all of you. Because whether you like the man or not, he brought most of you to this club. He looked after you, blah, blah, blah. I think it was just the mentality of our locker room. And it's probably why we didn't win things. There were too many players there who I felt just weren't good spirited players. You know what I mean? And even if you don't like Ron, you still turn up. Maybe not everyone.
Someone, yeah, if he invites you as well, yeah.
It's more than disrespectful. It's just outrageously horrible. And if one or two didn't turn up because they didn't like him, you go, yeah, whatever. But only 3 of us actually turned up. And I'm like, and I must have been another 10 players that he brought to the club himself. He signed them on. So that also just made me think, no wonder we're not winning things here, because with that sort of spirit, we're in trouble. And I think when Sir Alex came in, it didn't take him long to figure out that he needed to rebuild this club, not just in terms of the quality of players, but the quality of the atmosphere in the club. And bit by bit, he got rid of players and brought his own in, and ultimately, obviously, incredible success. But he built his success in bringing the right players in. And I thought we had some who were right players and we had some who weren't.
Mm. What was that like? So, because I started watching football around 2010, so I got to see the 3 years under Fergie until it all basically collapsed into what it is now. What was it like? When Sir Alex had come in, how different was he to previous managers? Was he different? Was he pretty much the same? But he was doing things a little bit differently. What was Sir Alex like initially as a manager?
He was very impressive, but you didn't know whether he was going to go on and be hugely successful the way he was. I mean, he was organized, which I liked, because Ron was a character. He'd be on his sunbed while we were training, and it was who he was. His skill was in buying players and building a team. It wasn't in the day-to-day stuff. What Sir Alex turned out to be was someone who was brilliant at everything. So he was good at buying players. He was good at coaching. He was good at tactics. He was good at man management. And so early on, my dealings with him, I'm like, wow, this guy is super impressive. He remembers everyone's name. He's got all the detail. He'd go to Old Trafford afterwards and meet everyone and introduce himself. And all that stuff has been written about. But he did all that. And I'm looking at him going, wow, this guy he's a machine. The way he just keeps going and doing all the right things. But still, you weren't sure whether he was ever going to be successful with it. And thank heavens he had time, because obviously we would have lost out on one of the greatest managers of all time if he'd have got sacked before he started winning trophies. But yeah, he was impressive. And straight away he came in and said, look, there's a drinking culture, so I need to get rid of him, him, and him, and him. There's too many players playing with injuries, so let's get rid of them. And these were great players. I mean, Norman Whiteside was carrying an injury. Norman was just a fabulous player, but I was injured, so I had to retire. Paul McGrath obviously had a big alcohol problem at the time, and they moved him on, and he was an outrageously good player. But then Steve Bruce came in. And Steve Bruce maybe wasn't as good as Paul McGrath, but he was steady. He was the right character at the right time. And so I think that's how Sir Alex started to rebuild the team. What a job he did. But again, the greatest thing he ever did for me wasn't just bringing in the right players. It was the fact that he developed his own players, because you show me a club today that can bring through Scholes, Giggs, Beckham, Butt, the Nevilles. I mean, if you get one good player, who have we got at the moment? Rashford, to me, not good enough. Greenwood, well, we thought he might be, but now we're not sure where he fits in with anything. You look around and McTominay, maybe, but none of them, with all due respect to those players, are in the same league as Scholes, Giggs, Beckham. I mean, those those are 3 players who are amongst the 3 best players ever played the game. So to develop those players, which Sir Alex took time and effort to do, that's genius. At the same time as building a team that at the time was winning the league title.
I think that's it's that balance. It's the fact that he was able to do stuff. And, you know, it's like the saying, you never win anything with kids. Well, he literally won things with kids, with pros, you know, and like you said, you know, buying the right players, but then also implementing this, you know, this policy at the club of getting rid of the drinking culture and whatever. And it was weird, you know, when I was researching your career, how that final season that you had at United is. It's so similar to the current season at United, you know, where the manager gets sacked, new manager comes in, you know, everyone, you know, this time last year, we were all thinking, you know, we're in the Europa League final, we're going to win it, we're going to get Champions League final, we're going to progress, right? We're going to progress. And we thought we've got a really likable squad, a squad that works well together and whatever. And now there's rumors about leaks. There's rumors that players don't want to be here. A lot of these players are running their contracts down. You know, Ranić's come in and he's exposed it. He said there's a huge problem. So very similar to Sir Alex, almost like he's gone in and he said there's this issue we need to buy 10 players. He said recently. I found it so similar how interesting it is, how similar it was to your final season. Before we get into sort of your final season and your retirement, this current United team. Do you agree that it's quite a little bit of a similar situation? And what do you make of it? And what do you think of the future of United with Erik Ten Hag coming in as well?
I hope it's a similar situation to when Sir Alex came in. I mean, I don't know. The previous managers were all good. You know, you can't tell me that Mourinho wasn't good. Van Gaal was excellent. David Moyes, we know by what he's doing at West Ham. These were all good managers. Even Solskjaer learned as he went along. So I don't think you blame the managers necessarily. The purchasing of the players is the issue, not even the players themselves. But, you know, we bought players who didn't fit into a system, or they fit into this system, and then different players fit into a different system. There was no director of football. There was no sensible purchasing. We purchased almost on a whim. Oh, he looks good, we'll buy him. You know, we'll pay Alexis Sanchez a fortune to stop him going to City because we think he might be a good player. It needed somebody to do that, and Sir Alex did that. Him and David Gill were just absolutely brilliant at purchasing the right player with the right character to play Sir Alex's system. So I think we've got ourselves into a mess. And right now, there's hardly a player. I think David De Gea is fantastic in goals. I think he is, but for him, we'd be 10 times worse. I think there's 1 or 2 others like McTominay, maybe Luke Shaw, Varane, certainly if he can get himself fit, but maybe Real Madrid sold him because he had an injury problem. You know, we think, oh, we've got Varane, one of the best centre halves in the world. Well,
I always found that weird why they got rid of that. It didn't make sense why he because he's a Champions League winner, and we just got back into the Champions League after being in the Europa League the previous season. We haven't won anything for years, and then all of a sudden Varane comes. I thought either other clubs looked at him, and saw he's got an injury problem, and we just went, he's Varane, we might as well buy him, because it was only about 25 million we paid for him as well. We didn't actually spend that much on him, and the fact that Real Madrid let him go, I thought that was a very interesting point as well. You say you're quite fond of De Gea. There's obviously this battle between De Gea and Henderson. What do you make of that? Do you think we should, you know, Henderson needs more games, or do you think Henderson should be let go out on loan, or do you think Henderson should be number 1?
Look, I don't think you can drop David that easily because he really has been solid. I think I would loan out Henderson. I think he's that good a goalkeeper that you want him to keep progressing. I don't think the goalkeeping is our issue. I think you have to look around the rest of the pitch. And then, you know, we know Matic is leaving, and Pogba and Mata and a whole bunch of others. You know, they all have to go. But I think Rashford, I watched him the last couple of games. Yeah, he's got pace, but he doesn't work. He doesn't close down. In the modern football, your striker has to work. And especially if you have Cristiano, who at his age can't put in the same yards, and the rest of the strikers have to be super fit. You watch Liverpool play, and I tell you what, and I'm going to annoy United fans, but I'd rather watch Liverpool play today than United.
Oh, I'm the same. I'm the same.
Because they're fantastic, and Salah works, and Mane works, and they're closing down. And I watch Rashford jogging. I'm like, what the hell? I wouldn't play Rashford. And if he can't close down, then sell him, because he's no good. Sancho has had a few moments, but $100 million, whatever, 70 million pounds, seriously? And there weren't many teams lining up at that price to buy him. So again, we're the ones throwing the big money, and all the other clubs are going, really? You're going to spend that much on a player we've done our homework on him, we're not sure. So there's so many question marks, and good luck to Ten Hag getting rid of a whole bunch, finding the right players to bring in, because he hasn't got time. People say we're 6 years behind Liverpool and City. Yeah, we are. But he hasn't got more than a year. No matter what you say, in a year's time, if it's a mess, the crowd won't put up with it. Sponsors won't put up with it. So the players he brings in, he's got 6 months to bed them in. And then they need to perform. So you can't be bringing in 19-year-olds and going, we'll wait 3 years. You've got to bring in 25-year-olds and go, right, we'll give you 6 months. And so he's got to purchase very cleverly, very wisely, for the right amount of money. And he's got to bring in about 10 players. That's a hell of an ask.
I don't know if you've seen. Well, that's what I'm a little. I think I'm actually quite optimistic about United. I quite like Ten Hag. I don't know if you've heard about Paul Mitchell potentially coming in, being head of recruitment or technical director. I think that's a huge thing. Like you're saying, bringing in the right players, bringing the right profile of players. And not going out and just spending money on the obvious player, but actually going out and trying to find, the next Sadio Mane, the next N'Golo Kante, the next, Alderweireld, whatever, which is what Paul Mitchell has done in the past. He's bought these players from, obscured, places. No one else has looked at them, and all of a sudden they're world class and they get sold for 30, 40, 50 million. You look at Liverpool. Liverpool bought Andrew Robertson and Gini Wijnaldum from relegated clubs, and they both have won Champions League and a Premier League each. Like,
that's true.
I think recruitment is such a huge thing. I know you haven't got that much time. You've got your vegetable pie. I don't want it to get cold. I hope we can do a part 2, because there's so much more that I want to talk to you about. But I want to ask you about the injury that you got. You got the injury whilst training at England. Initially, when you got that injury, did you feel like there's something wrong here? And that process of trying to get it fixed and then eventually going, you know what, I've just got to retire. What was that whole journey like?
It was a tough one, because when I initially got the tear in the meniscus, back in the day, they just took the meniscus out. They wouldn't do that today. So you got bone on bone. But I initially thought it wasn't too bad. He didn't take out the whole meniscus, to be fair. He took out a chunk of it, but I felt that would be okay. But I had to rush to get fit to go to the World Cup in Mexico. And Bobby Robson said, look, you're my number 2. He said, but you got to be fit. So I trained really hard, made it, took me to Mexico. We trained in Colorado in the USA, first at high altitude. And the goalkeeper coach, Kelly, put me through some really, really tough training to make sure I was fit. And the morning after that training, my knee just swelled up. It was just too much. And when I came back from the World Cup and they operated again, the surgeon said, look, your knee just disintegrated. Not your knee, the cartilage just disintegrated. It does happen sometimes, and it happens when you try and get back to fitness too quickly. He said, now you really do have bone on bone, top and bottom. He said, so you're going to have a problem. He said, so if I was you, I'd wait many months before you start training and check with me. So basically, from the start of the season, I was just arriving at the cliff and going into the physio's room and just doing straight leg lifts with my right knee and then then weights. And I'd never had a break in 9 years at United. I played 60 games a year, 9 years. I think I'd missed 7 games in 9 years or something. And so for the very first time, I didn't have to stress about the weekend. I didn't have to pack to travel. I could get to see places in Manchester and Cheshire and actually live a normal life. And it sounds funny to a fan, a normal life, but I mean that. I mean, I didn't, as a footballer, you watch what you eat, you watch what you drink. Not that I'm a drinker at all, but you're in bed early. But now I could book a concert on a Saturday night and go straight after the game and not have to worry about team meetings afterwards. Or I could go away for the weekend down to London and go watch a game there and go and catch a show. And
I just stopped on the street or anything?
Not so much in London, no. A few people, but in Manchester, yes, obviously a lot. It was just a wonderful time to do something different. And I'm not saying I didn't love playing, but when you get sort of, I think, 8-9 years nonstop, suddenly you do something different. You're like, wow, this is fun. And we got to do silly things in the physio's room. I mean, one day Robert comes in with a whole bunch of eggs. He said, I've got a challenge for you and for Norman Whiteside. He said, I want you to put a whole egg in your mouth, crunch it, right? Swallow the yolk and take the eggshell out. And Robert managed to do it, and I tried. And of course, as soon as the eggshell hits the back of your throat, came flying out. Norman couldn't do it either. Physio walks in, there's eggshells everywhere. It was just, it was a giggle. And I hadn't felt so relaxed. And, I've been tense. Goalkeeper is a very tense position. And goalkeeper when you're young and at Man United is hugely stressful. So it was a strange time of relaxation. And then eventually in March, I'd been out for literally the entire season until March. And I'd started jogging and doing a bit of diving and I actually felt quite good. And the keeper got injured, Chris Turner. And so Alex came to me, he said, look, Gary, you've either got to play or retire, one of the two. So do you want to play this weekend away at Luton? And I said, sure, let's give it a try. And I played and really enjoyed it, played well, got a draw, came back, played against City, got a draw, played against Sheffield Wednesday away, beat them. I played 5 games, but after the 3rd game, I started to get this ache in my leg. And I said to the boss, I said, do you mind if I just skip training Monday, Tuesday, and I'll pick it up Wednesday? He said, whatever you need to do. And the following week, Wednesday came and I went, just give me another day. And after the 5th game, the Sunday morning, I turned over in bed and let out a yelp and I went, oh, crap. This knee is not going to recover. And so I saw the specialist and he said, you're done. And so Alex was brilliant. I mean, he was like, son, at similar age to you, I had to retire. Anything we could do, would you want to stay on and be goalkeeper coach? And I thought, wow, there's an offer. But I said, you know what, to be honest, I'm homesick. I need to get back to South Africa and to family and start a new career outside of soccer, possibly. And that, about 2 weeks later, I had to get the England doctor to sign off. He was the Watford doctor. And so we were down playing at Watford and he came to see me. He said, look, I'm sorry, I've seen the x-rays, blah, blah, blah. Spoke to your surgeon. We're going to have to sort of retire you out at 27, whatever I was at the time. And he said, but you know what, you still had a great career, with England and United. He said, I want you to meet someone. So he took me into a little room next door there, and there was a 17-year-old Watford junior who had a tackle so bad that the guy took out both his knees, not one, but the tackle had gone through and the second. Double foot tackle of some sort. And this doctor said, this kid, we're having reconstruction on both his knees, and we hope he'll walk properly, but he'll never play soccer again. And he was an England youth international. And so I spoke to this kid and he said, my dreams are gone before they even started. And as I walked out, the doctor said, you've had 10 years at the biggest club in the world. You've been to England in the World Cup. Go home, start a new life and be grateful. And I never looked back. I said, those are some of the wisest words I've ever heard. And that was me. I was able to walk away and say, I'm grateful for the years at United. I couldn't have dreamed of much more. And yes, maybe there was something left on the table, but hey, I'm very grateful for the 375 games I did play and the cup finals and everything else. So I've never really looked back, and those were the words that made all the difference for me.
Yeah, I mean, two FA Cups, a Charity Shield, playing under Alex Ferguson, and I think is it the 4th most amount of it's some 4th that David De Gea overtook you recently. Yeah, clean sheets, that's it. Yeah, it was either clean sheets or clean sheets. 4th amount. I mean, you were 3rd at one point, and then De Gea. I know you said you liked De Gea, but I bet you think, come on, Dean Henderson, you just need to just overtake him. Last year, you were thinking, right, he's not going to beat me, and then now, he's gone ahead. But 4th most, especially at a time where you were playing, 60 games a season, like you said, is incredible. And someone who's regarded as one of the world's best goalkeepers ever, Peter Schmeichel, has said, I don't know if you know about him saying that he idolized you growing up. Which must have been an incredible feeling. You never, as far as I'm aware, you never, really got into coaching. Do you ever think maybe I should have taken up Sir Alex Ferguson's offer? Would have won a few Premier Leagues if you had done. Like, do you ever think about that, or do you go?
No, not really, because you make decisions at the time. And I needed to go home. That was my first decision. And yes, I look back and I did some stupid things with the money I got from my testimonial. I was entitled to a year of box and dines and other ways of making money, and I just turned it down and said, I'm going home. Years later, when you're struggling for money, you go, damn, that was stupid.
Especially now with the Premier League money, you're thinking, crap, I should have done it.
I sold my house in Hale when I should have kept it and rented it out. There's a whole bunch of stupid things. At the time, you think you have a lot of money, you don't need to be that sensible. But what I did was sensible. I bought properties in London 2 months before the property market crashed in London. So a lot of things went pear-shaped after I retired that I look back and think, would I love to have been a goalkeeper coach at United? Absolutely. But I needed to go back to South Africa. And in fact, I played 2 more years. I didn't train much.
Was it
But once I
Kaiser?
rested Kaiser Chiefs, yeah. And they, I tell you what, they're the Man United of Africa. They had fantastic following. Once I'd rested for 6 months, my knee was okay as long as I didn't train on it much. I had 2 seasons with them. We won 6 trophies. I won my league title eventually. And then I just thought, you know what, the knee's hurting again. I just need to stop. And I wasn't earning much money. Soccer in those days in South Africa was hardly any money at all. And then I went into business. So I don't have any regrets, except for years later, you look back at the success Alex had and think I could have been part of that. And I could have been a huge part of United. And I would love to have stayed at United. I just would have had to have had a house in Spain that I disappeared to on weekends for sunshine or something. But it would have been
never
possible.
Ended up getting over the sunshine. You always
never
needed it. Yeah.
Never did. And I think that's it. You have to follow your heart sometimes. And I went back to South Africa. I mean, I live in Miami now, right on the water here in South Beach. And it's hot here almost all year round. And this is my ideal lifestyle. So if anything, I probably should have come to Miami after United. But you do what you do. And you don't I don't have regrets, because all the way along, I loved playing for Chiefs. I was on TV for 25 years in South Africa. I was the Gary Lineker of South African soccer. And I did really well there. Yeah, for 25 years.
Well, like the host.
The host, yeah.
Wow. You know what, I'm not surprised, because what my follow-up question to this was, why didn't you go into like punditry in this country? Because the way you articulated yourself, throughout this podcast, you've been one of the easiest. I've had over about 50 guests. Well, I've had nearly 50 guests on my podcast, and you've been one of the easiest to talk to, very easy to talk to bounce off of. And I thought, why isn't this guy on Sky Sports in this country, or BT Sport in this country? Because especially as someone who's a goalkeeper myself, I'd love for you to be told by Sky Sports or BT Sport, right, you're going to focus on the goalkeepers in the Premier League this season. We're going to give you access to all their data. Yeah. Here's David De Gea. Watch what he does in every single game, his movement, and we want you to overanalyze everything. I'd love for them to do that. But because goalkeeper is just one position, I know it gets dismissed so much. Like, there's no one that ever focuses on it. They very rarely bring on goalkeeper pundits. I feel like we need to get you on Sky Sports in England, right? Need you to start speaking. Hopefully, maybe they'll watch this and they'll give you a job, and they'll give me a job as well. My dream is to be a presenter. Weirdly enough, my dream is to actually be like Gary Lineker and host Match of the Day one day. Don't know how realistic that is, but you should always dream.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've got some sort of just quick fire questions to you, which will only take a few seconds. What's the one thing that you feel like made Sir Alex Ferguson as successful as he is? Based on the short stint that you had with him, what's that one thing that you feel like people should do?
He can mix. He's one of the few people I've ever met who can mix being extremely tough with extremely kind. And by that, I mean, I've known managers who walk in a locker room and scream at everyone. And I've known managers like Dave Sexton who'd walk in and speak very softly to everyone. But Sir Alex could give you the hairdryer. He could walk up to you and scream. In fact, I'll give you the story at Luton, my very first game, on the way down after I got injured. The lad said, "Look out for the hairdryer." And we're in the locker room, the changing room, and I'm looking for where he plugged his hairdryer, and I didn't see it. I thought, okay, forget about it. Get on with the first half. So first half comes, we score. There's a bit of halftime. Across comes, I go, and I think, no, it's not mine. I shout away. Colin Gibson at the back post gets beat 1-1. So I walk in, sit down. So Alex walked up to me and says, "The goal?" I said, "Well, it was a cross. Wasn't mine." Shouted away. It's up to the fullback to deal with it. He walks up to Colin Gibson, puts his nose against Colin Gibson's side and screams at him. And you can see Gibbo's hair going backwards. And I'm thinking, shit, that's the hairdryer. And so I'm looking down going, don't laugh, don't respond. This is not, and I wait. And eventually we all walk out for the second half. And I'm looking at Sir Alex. He was only 43 then, I don't know, 44 maybe. Young man, I'm looking at him, a young man for a coach. I'm looking at him and he sees me and he calls me over. He says, "Gary, there's some people you shout at and there's some people you talk quietly to." And he said, "The key is to know the difference." And I went, holy crap. That is thinking beyond anything I'd ever heard from a manager before. Because he knew if he shouted at me like that, I would get straight back at him, right? But for Gibbo needed that. I need a pat on the back. Come on, son, you can do better. That's how I operate. The fact that he could tell the difference just stunned me. And so throughout his career, if you listen to the players talk about him, they'll say that he would be angry and he'd get you fired up and he'd get you ready to, get out and battle. At the same time, he'd ask you how the wife is and give you time off. And he was one of the first. And today they say, so-and-so's having a baby, so he's taking the weekend off. That never used to be the case. And I think he was one of the first managers who would say to someone, this is important to you. I want you to go and spend the weekend with your wife, or your father's passed away or whatever, and you come back when you're ready. Or you're playing badly, you know what, son? I think he did this with Schmeichel. He said to Schmeichel, you go off, take the missus, take 2 weeks in the Bahamas, the club's paying, go. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. And he comes back and he plays brilliantly, because he could just see Schmeichel was, he's under pressure and he just wasn't enjoying what he was doing. It's the ability to care for someone, but at the same time switch in an instant and be fired up. Not many people can do that. That's what makes him a genius, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. If Ralph Rangnick comes to you and he goes, Gary, we want you part of the setup, and you could pick one role, what would that role be?
One role,
like one position. You could have whichever position.
Oh, a role. Oh, the one that pays the most.
But what sort of influence do you think you'd be good at then?
No, I mean, I wouldn't accept any role. Firstly, they wouldn't ask, and I wouldn't accept either way, because I don't have the skills they need. What they need is the director of football more than anything. There are other skills you can get, assistant coaches, goalkeeper coaches. There's plenty of great ones in England. What they need more than anything else is a director of coaching. They have clever financial guys there. There's no question, no matter what you think about the guys upstairs, they have made a lot of money for United and for the Glazers. And the Glazers have put money on the table. What's been missing the whole time, and that Ed Woodward hasn't been able to do, is the director of coaching role. So if there's one role they have to get right, and they have to spend whatever money they have spent, that is the role. Once you get that right, I've no doubt Erik Ten Hag is a very good coach. He has a chance at making it a huge success. But if he doesn't get that role right, then nothing will work.
Yeah. My final question, and it's the question that I ask every guest that I have on here, and it's the reason why I started the podcast. I started the podcast last year, my first year at university, because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I was stressing out because I'm spending thousands of pounds on a degree that I might not ever even end up using. And the question is, if you could go back and speak to your 20-year-old self, right, and you could tell him one thing, what would that one piece of advice be?
Probably to enjoy my summers off instead of going on all those England tours. I should have just turned them all down, especially with Clements and Chilton. I should have just gone home, relaxed, been with friends, gone to Spain, relaxed, got some sunshine, because playing for United is the greatest gift you can ever, outside of children, is the greatest gift you can ever have. And to go into it tired and frustrated and annoyed, or whatever feelings I was feeling, that's just, you're missing the whole point. I needed to recharge my batteries 110%, not do anything in the summer, and come back ready to go, because that's what you get paid for. You get paid to win the league, not to travel with internationals and all that stuff. So if I could have done that, that's probably what I would have done.
And that's it for this week's episode of the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. What an episode. What insight into the life of a footballer. Hopefully I can get some more footballers on. But Gary Bailey, what an interesting guy. He did give me a recommendation for someone else, so I'm going to try and get that person on very, very soon. But yeah, no, I couldn't believe it when I interviewed another ex-professional footballer. But this one who played for my favourite team. It's mental, isn't it? It's mental how nice people are as well. You know what? If you're still listening to this, if you want to start something, whether it's a blog, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube channel, just start it, man. You never know what could happen. Yeah, I haven't made any money out of this, but bloody hell, I've gotten jobs out of it, 2 full-time jobs, 2 part-time jobs out of it, and I've literally just sat with someone who's got the 4th most amount of clean sheets for United. It's just mental. Make sure you tune in for next week, because next week I'll be sitting down with another very, very interesting person. I'll be sitting down with someone who started a Facebook group at the beginning of the first lockdown and an Instagram page, and has literally turned that into her own business. And she's worked with some of the biggest brands in the entire world, accumulating, I think, a community of over 100,000 people. It's mental what people can do if they just start their side hustles, isn't it? Anyway, make sure you tune in for that one. If you did enjoy this episode, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like, share, do all that jazz. Do I really care about that sort of stuff? Not really. I just want people to enjoy these episodes because I like making them. Other than that, thank you so much. Have a great week. Until next time.